Was part of Kamala Harris's closing argument made yesterday at the same place where Donald Trump incited a violent insurrection against the Republic. And the central closing question of this election is whether we will cede some of our fundamental freedoms to the will of a petty tyrant. Trump and his allies have worked very hard to make us forget how much of a threat he is. In the final weeks of this election, some of the people who worked with Trump at the highest levels as president have reminded us, like his former chief of staff and retired Marine Corps General John Kelly, who called Trump a fascist. All this really started with reporting by legendary journalist Bob Woodward in his new book, War, where he reported that General Mark Milley, who is chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said Trump is the most dangerous person in this country, a fascist to the core. And Bob Woodward joins me now. It's great to have you on, Bob. I wondered if I can ask you about a concern that I think you see echoed in Milley coming up to you at that event where he told you this, and in the minds of voters, including undecided voters, that David Plouffe just said, which is the idea that should Trump win again, the kinds of folks that were there attempting to restrain him and keep him on the same page of the Constitution are gone, and that could spell catastrophe. I wonder, given all of your copious reporting, if you think that's a rational concern.
Well, it's more than rational. I mean, Trump doesn't he's a loner. He's a one-man band. He does not like advice. He doesn't like the truth. And the primary example that's being kicked around now, it's very painful. He still claims he won in 2020. 60 courts have rejected that. Even his friend, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, has told President Trump, I report in my book, said, hey, Mr. President, you're with the people who think the earth is flat and the people who thought we didn't go to the moon. Get over that. 2020 is over. And Trump will go around, and actually on one occasion, I report Trump is at a rally, and then afterwards he calls Graham and he says, oh, Lindsey, I only brought up 2020 twice, as if that's some sort of a sacrifice or compromise. 2020 is settled. It is over. And to cling to that illusion now is sad. George Washington said our Constitution is very fragile. The system is very fragile. And we have to be careful how we use this system that we have. It can break apart. And one of the rules, common sense rules, should be when you lose, you kind of face the music and not deny it. And Trump, of course, is denying it. And he's setting the stage for, again, denying if he loses in 2024. This is sad. This is something you would hope the Republican Party, which still has some sensible people, would drum it into Trump's head. Please stop this.
You know, there's many components of a sort of free and open society, including a free press. You have been associated with the Washington Post for the entirety of your career, a storied institution in the American press. There was quite a bit of controversy over the decision by the paper under the ownership of Jeff Bezos not to issue an election endorsement. Bezos, there was some conflicting information about it, including what seems to be clearly an untruth by Will Lewis, the editor-in-chief, about who originated that decision. Bezos took credit for it in a piece he wrote, basically saying it has to do with the erosion of trust and people don't want to listen to us about who to vote for. You and Carl Bernstein, of course, who broke the Watergate story, issued this statement. We respect the traditional independence of the editorial page. This decision, 11 days out from the 2024 presidential election, ignores the Washington Post's own overwhelming reportorial evidence on the threat Donald Trump poses to democracy. How important is the resilience of democratic institutions over this next period, do you think?
Well, it's central, and the Washington Post has done stunning, amazing reporting to tell us who Trump is, and that he is this person who does not believe in the constitutional order. And they've done such a good job. That should be embraced by the editorial page of the Washington Post. They should be proud of it. Back 50 years ago, during Watergate, when Carl Bernstein and I were doing much more controversial, debatable reporting, the editorial page said and stood behind that reporting. The reporting on Trump, they should be proud. I know these people, they are proud. And to have the owner come in and summarily dismiss reality, that is tragic. Shame on that happening to the Washington Post is a strong institution. It needs to stand together. In this case, it's so easy. It requires no compromise at all because the reporting that has told us who Donald Trump is, that he's this danger. Trump does not believe in democracy. He does not believe in the Constitution. He only believes in himself and his own instincts. That's been reported in a very powerful, remarkably accurate, documented way through the editorial page. That's a serious blunder, which is more than a black eye.
Bob Woodward, whose new book, War, is out now with so much of that remarkable reporting. Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.